So let's begin by making a ball in Photoshop that we'll then bring into After Effects to use. Okay? You can find Photoshop in your dock perhaps down here depending on how your computer's set up, or I'm on a Mac obviously, so you might be different if you're on a PC. But on a Mac, if I look at my Finder, I can look in my applications here, and there's an Adobe folder that has actually, it's not in the Adobe folder. It's all my Adobe apps are listed here. So if you have Creative Cloud installed, you should see everything here. I'm going to start with Photoshop. They're alphabetized. So I've got Adobe P Photoshop right here. And then this little icon here is the Photoshop application. If I double click on that, it'll open Photoshop. And mine opens rather quickly. Yours might take a little longer. Here's your basic Photoshop interface. Now when you're starting off, you don't have, this isn't anything, it's not a document or anything until I save it. So the first thing you want to do is say File. Actually, you want to start by making a new file, File New, and then Photoshop gives you some options here. Okay, so the main things are you working on photos? Are you going to make something to print, art and illustration, web, mobile, or film and video? For this, we're just going to make a little piece of art to bring in. So you might think it's going to be film and video, but if you choose film and video, these are like full screen sizes. All right, so this 1080p is a 1920 by 1080 pixel. That's like an HD video frame, and these are different, smaller and different size frames. We're not going to be working full frame right now. We just want to make a little piece of art to animate. So I'm going to call it art and illustration, and you can choose the size of your document in pixels. Okay, and as we move through this, you'll learn more about why pixels are important if you don't already know. But Photoshop and After Effects are both what we call resolution dependent, and so it matters how many pixels large your art is. Small numbers here will give you low res images. So if we do something that's big, like 1,000 pixels by 1,000 pixels, that's pretty large for video. So let's see. I'm going to call this red ball. I just do my stuff in all caps so it's easy for everybody to see. But I'm going to call this red ball, and I'm going to leave it at let's make this only 500. Okay, because we don't really need it to be that large. 500 by 500 pixels, resolution 300, DPI is fine. Color mode RGB, that's red, green, blue. That's for video, so that's good. We want that. Background content's white. Don't leave your background contents white. Change it to transparent. If you make it white or black, when we bring this piece of art into After Effects and want to bounce it around, if we want to put something behind it, it'll have a square around the ball. So you want to make it transparent whenever you're making your art. Okay, it's kind of important. And say create. Now we will get this thing. This is 500 pixels by 500. The checkerboard tells you in Adobe lingo, when you see this checkerboard, it means it's transparent. It means there's no pixels there. Okay. Photoshop operates on layers. So right now when you start off, you've got layer 1 and it's empty. And we're just going to make one layer of pixels on here. If you know Photoshop at all, you'll know that Photoshop and After Effects both work on stacking layers. Okay, so you can make as many layers as your computer can handle memory-wise, which is kind of unlimited, really. And you can just stack things on top of each other. Right now, we're just going to put a circle in here. So the way that I'm going to do this is use this second tool. If I click and hold it, you'll see a pop-up. So if I click and hold, I've got rectangular marquee, which is what it's set to, but I can choose elliptical marquee, which will be a good tool for drawing a circle. So if I choose elliptical marquee, what you'll see is this little crosshair. And the way this works is when you click and hold your click and drag, you might be able to see that it's leaving like a circular or an elliptical path. I'm going to let go of this, and you'll see, it might be hard to see this. I'm going to make it larger. Let's see if it'll let me do this with my magnifying glass. Yeah. You should see a what Adobe calls a marquee, which is a selection. It's an animated dotted line. If you look at it, you can see it moving. Some tutorials call it marching ants, but this animated dotted line is Adobe saying, I have these pixels on this layer selected. What do you want me to do with them? Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of that. The way you get rid of a selection is hold down Command on your keyboard and hit D for deselect, and that undoes that selection. Right? I'm going to do it again just to show you. If I get the elliptical marquee tool, what I usually do is hold down Shift. When you hold down Shift and click and drag and pull, holding down Shift constrains your proportions and makes it a perfect circle. And Adobe's also popping up a little X crosshair there telling me that the circle I'm making is centered, which is helpful. So that's not really that important, but if you get it by dragging and that little pop-up happens, that little X and Y axis, that can be helpful. So I'm going to let go there, and you should be able to see a circular marquee selected there, okay? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Edit and choose Fill, because I want to fill this selection with something. And Adobe says, what do you want to fill it with? Your contents can be any of these, but choose color, because we want to fill it with color. And when you choose color and click on it, you'll get a color selector here. All right? You can drag around in here with your mouse, and you can see this top block here is going to be the color you're choosing. If I don't want blue, I can grab this slider here and take it up to red on this axis of color, so I can take it all the way to red. I'm going to go over here and choose like a nice bright red, say OK, and then it's waiting for me to say OK here. When I say OK here, bam, it fills it with red. Okay, so this layer 1 is red filled disc or ball, and the checkerboard around it is transparent. If you look closely, you'll see it's still selected, so Photoshop won't let me do anything until I get rid of that selection. The way that you get rid of the selection always is to hold down Command on your keyboard and hit D for deselect. Command D. Command on a PC is what? Is it it's not Control. It's geez, I should know this. I'm not looking at a PC keyboard right now. It's the one next to the space bar to get you to unselect it. All right. So before we save this, I want to name this layer 1 what it is. So I'm going to double click on it, click, and it'll select this word, and I can say ball. Call it a ball. Okay. I always like to name things what they are. You can imagine as you work, you might get something that has 10, 20, 75 layers. And if they're not named, it can get rather confusing. You can tell what's on a layer by turning this eyeball on and off. This just makes it transparent or visible, so visible or invisible. So if you ever want to figure out what layer you're on, you can kind of do this and see. All right, now I'm going to save this. I'm going to say File, Save As, and it wants to call it redball.psd. That's fine with me. Always call things what they are so that you can find them later. I'm going to put this on my desktop. I have already made a folder. I've got a St. Mike's folder, and I've got a Summer 19 folder. So what I'd recommend you do is make a folder for this class somewhere on your desktop or on a hard drive, and keep everything in your folder so that you can find it. Okay? You can see I've got a bunch of art I made for the canvas. So what I'm going to do is in this Summer 19 folder, I'm going to make a new folder and call this Demos. Okay? And I'll create that. So in my Summer 19 folder, I've got a Demos folder. So it's going to make a Photoshop file called redball.psd in the Demos folder so I know where to find it. I would advise you to do the same thing. Be very deliberate about where you put your files in folders so you can go get them later. We're going to be making and moving around a lot of files. And if you lose them or get disoriented about where they're kept, it can slow you down and mess you up. So pay close attention to where you are putting things when you're saving them so you can find them later, and also what you call them. So I'm going to save that. This is kind of redundant. I don't know why you wouldn't say OK, maximize compatibility, say sure, say OK. All right, so there we just made a red ball. And next we're going to take it into After Effects and move it around.